Welcome to the deep dive. We all experience aging, right? It's just, well, part of life, a natural progression that seems unchangeable. But what if that deeply held belief was maybe not entirely accurate? What if we could truly understand and maybe even influence how we age?
That's really the fascinating question at the heart of our deep dive today, the biology of aging.
Right.
And our session is built around a pretty significant June 2025 report from the UN Scientific Advisory Board, plus some other key scientific excerpts. These sources really shine a light on this rapidly evolving field.
So our mission today really is to unearth what aging genuinely means biologically, explore these cutting-edge scientific breakthroughs that are trying to redefine it.
And the implications, too.
Exactly, and critically look at the profound societal implications, which, stretch far beyond just our individual health. We want to give you a quick, insightful path to being truly well-informed on this critical subject.
Yeah, and you can expect us to journey from, the tiniest molecular shifts inside our cells all the way up to big technologies like AI and gene editing.
Wow.
And then zoom out again to the really big picture questions about how we can ensure longer, healthier lives for everyone.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
Yep.
When we talk about aging, it's not just, adding another candle to the cake, is it?
Yeah, not at all.
The sources give us a really clear biological definition. What does that actually mean?
That's a really crucial distinction. Biologically, aging isn't simply time passing. It's a complex process. It's characterized by declines in our body's function.
Okay.
A decreased capacity to recover from stress, think wounds, infections,
Right.
and an increased susceptibility to disease and, well, eventually death.
And it's different for everyone.
Absolutely. It's highly individualized, shaped by this complex interplay of our genes, our environment, our lifestyle. It's not one size fits all.
And what's really compelling, I think, is getting into this at the most fundamental level, inside ourselves.
Yeah.
Because that's where the real story seems to unfold.
Exactly. Think of ourselves maybe as tiny factories constantly working. Aging, at its core, is when these factories start accumulating, let's say, junk and damage.
Okay, junk and damage.
Yeah. So first, some cells just get old. They stop working properly. We call that senescence.
Senescence, heard that term.
They become like zombie cells, not quite dead, but not doing their job. And sometimes they even send out these distress signals that harm other healthy cells nearby.
That's not bad.
It's not ideal. Then the factory's instruction manual, that's our DNA, starts getting typos and damage. And the repair crew maybe gets a bit lazy over time. This leads to what's called genomic instability. You know those plastic tips on shoelaces? Aglets.
Yeah?
Our DNA has protective caps called telomeres at the end of chromosomes, and they tend to fray and shorten over time.
Like the shoelaces.
Exactly like the shoelaces. And this shortening is a main signal for cells to enter that senescent or zombie cell state. And finally, the factory's quality control for building proteins, that's called proteostasis, it starts to break down.
Proteostasis, okay.
Proteins are these tiny machines doing everything in our cells. When quality control fails, these essential proteins get misfolded or damaged. And that leads to widespread issues, including disorders like Alzheimer's. So it's really a multi-pronged attack on our cellular machinery.
So it's not just simple wear and tear, but our actual genetic code is involved in all this. How do our genes play a role beyond just, accumulating damage?
Well, our genetic code is the master blueprint, right? It regulates all cellular functions and even our susceptibility to diseases. So it plays a really significant role in aging.
Okay.
And over time, random mutations in our genome can indeed predispose us to diseases like cancer or increase the chance of things like heart attacks.
And we're not just talking about the DNA sequence itself, are we? There's something called epigenetics. Can you maybe break that down for us?
Sure. Think of your DNA as the permanent blueprint of your house. Epigenetics, then, are like the light switches and dimmer knobs on that blueprint.
Okay, I like that analogy.
They don't change the house's structure, the DNA sequence itself, but they control which rooms are lit up and how brightly. So which genes are active and which are silenced.
Right.
As we age, these switches can get sticky, maybe start flickering, leading to problems in how our cells function and express genes.
And that's measurable.
Increasingly, yes. Scientists have developed epigenetic clocks that read these switches. These clocks are potentially a more precise measure of a person's biological age.
More precise than just years lived.
Potentially, yes. Reflecting individual health risks and maybe even predicting mortality better than just chronological age.
Wow.
And, on an optimistic note, large-scale genome studies have even found genetic links to longevity. For example, variations in the apolipoprotein gene, APOE, which can help control the risk of diseases like Alzheimer's.
So we've gone from the micro level, these tiny cellular factories, right up to the macro level of our whole body. How do we see aging systemically across tissues and organs?
Yeah, systemically, we often measure aging through the functional decline of tissues and organs. We see this through changes in common blood biomarkers like glucose and cholesterol levels.
Stuff you get tested at the doctor's.
Exactly. Those are highly correlated with disease and mortality risk. Similarly, changing metabolic functions, hormone production shifts, general organ degeneration, these are all pretty well-established markers of aging.
Okay.
And then there's this concept called inflammaging.
Inflammaging, like inflammation and aging combined.
Precisely. It's this low-grade chronic inflammation that seems to occur just as part of the aging process. It results from factors like those senescent zombie cells we mentioned, also oxidation, stress, the accumulation of molecular damage, and it contributes to things like degenerative disorders, cardiovascular disease, cancers.
So it's like a slow burn inside.
Kind of, yeah. And over time, the weakening of our immune system itself, also due to aging, places older people at greater risk of disease and death. It's all interconnected.
So it's really not just the visible wrinkles, is it? But this hidden chronic process.
Yeah.
It really makes you rethink what we just dismiss as getting old.
It does.
What stands out most to you about all these intricate layers, it's just far more complex than appearance, isn't it?
That's a great question. And honestly, what stands out most is just how active aging is at every level. It's not just a passive decline. It's this complex web of interconnected biological processes.
Right.
And that very complexity, as you mentioned, is precisely what's fueling this huge surge in scientific research, trying to understand it and maybe even intervene.
It makes perfect sense then that there's been such a huge surge in research. We're living longer globally, which sounds great on the surface, but the critical question is, are we living better?
That's truly the core challenge. The UN report highlights this demographic shift. By 2030, 1 in 6 people globally will be 65 or older.
1 in 6. Wow.
And those numbers keep climbing towards 2050. But here's the critical point you raised. Longer lifespans are not always matched by improved health span, that period of life spent in good health.
So we live longer, but sicker.
Potentially, yes. More people living longer periods with impaired cognitive function, chronic diseases, other ailments. It leads to this growing gap between lifespan and health span.
And the costs must be huge.
Enormous. The sheer social and economic challenges this trend presents have really kicked scientific research into overdrive, leading to the rapid growth of what we now often call geroscience.
Geroscience. Okay, so that seems like this new frontier. What's its core mission? What are scientists actually trying to achieve by focusing on aging itself, not just specific diseases?
In essence, geroscience aims to discover ways to target these fundamental aging mechanisms we've been talking about.
The root causes.
Exactly, with the goal of delaying, preventing, alleviating, or maybe even treating multiple disorders and diseases, all linked back to these aging processes.
And how do they approach that?
Well, the general approaches include things like altering or tracking the biological mechanisms of aging directly, pharmacological treatments for age-related diseases, obviously, dietary interventions to boost health span.
Food is medicine, kind of?
Kind of, yeah. And even surgical approaches like organ replacement or tissue regeneration. Now, the UN brief we're drawing on, it specifically focuses on recent developments in the biological and medical approaches.
Right.
While still acknowledging, of course, the important roles that social and environmental factors play. Can't ignore those.
Okay. And the sources mentioned major advances, especially in genetics over the past, 25 years. That seems to have really fueled a lot of optimism. It sounds like something we're on the cusp of rewriting fundamental programs in our bodies.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of excitement, yeah. It stems from discoveries of specific genes linked to longevity, enzymes involved in DNA repair, certain drugs that can regulate cellular function. You might hear about mTOR inhibitors, and also the significant effects of dietary interventions like calorie restriction on the lifespan of animals in lab settings.
Right, the animal studies.
These findings have led some scientists to speculate, perhaps quite boldly, that aging itself may be, at least partially, biologically controllable.
Controllable. That's a big word.
It is. And this optimism has spurred a really dramatic increase in investment in gerontology. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars offered annually as prizes for breakthroughs, major national investments in research facilities.
Yeah.
It's booming.
But There's always a but, isn't there?
There often is in science. It's crucial to acknowledge the other side. The source material also clearly warns about separating the genuine hope from, well, the hype in this field.
Okay.
Some scientists have criticized the field, actually, for being overly optimistic, suggesting that sometimes the drive to attract that large-scale funding overshadows the actual demonstrated application to human beings. We're not mice, after all.
That's a really important point. So let's talk about some of these specific breakthroughs, trying to keep that balance in mind. I've heard about senolytic drugs. You mentioned cellular senescence earlier, those zombie cells.
Yes.
Are scientists actually developing ways to get rid of them? How do these drugs work, and what's the real promise? Especially since you said senescence can be useful sometimes, like in wound healing.
That's a great question, and it really gets to the nuance. Senolytic drugs are designed to selectively eradicate these senescent cells. The idea is to prevent their harmful buildup in our systems and potentially ward off a number of age-related disorders.
So targeted removal.
Targeted removal, exactly. Clinical trials are underway for applications in things like diabetes, Alzheimer's, age-related osteoporosis, eye disease, even certain cancers. And they have shown some promising early results. But you're right to point out the nuance. These studies have also really emphasized the ongoing need for a deeper biological understanding of senescence itself.
Yeah.
We need to understand its precise role in disease progression, particularly because, as you said, this process does play vital roles in normal development and wound healing earlier in life. So it's likely about targeting the persistently harmful senescent cells, not all of them.
Makes sense. What about this idea of reversing or halting the aging clock? The epigenetic clock you mentioned.
Ah, yes. This is a truly groundbreaking area. It appears many organisms, including us mammals, do lose genetic and epigenetic information over time as cells age. This leads to pretty significant changes in which genes are turned on or off.
All right, the sticky switching.
Exactly. A very recent study, again in mice, suggested that this loss of information might not only be halted, but potentially even reversed through something called epigenetic reprogramming.
Reversed? Wow.
Yeah. Now, it's still only in animal trials, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But the potential for completely new therapeutic approaches to age-related diseases and genuinely lengthened health spans from this kind of work is potentially enormous.
Okay, another big one. Base editing. Inspired by CRISPR, right? How does this technique fit into combating aging?
Base editing is a remarkably precise tool, even more precise in some ways than standard CRISPR. Think of it like a pencil with an eraser for DNA.
Okay.
The genetic mutation behind Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, for example, that's the condition causing rapid aging symptoms in children. It's often just a single letter change in the DNA.
Just one letter.
Often, yes.
Right.
A recent base editing technique was able to correct this specific mutation in mice models of the disease.
Incredible.
If this proves successful and safe in humans, base editing holds the promise of pinpointing and potentially eradicating some really significant age-related diseases by fixing these individual typos in our DNA.
But I guess it's not always that simple.
Well, that's the thing. What's fascinating here is that a recent study out of UC San Diego found that even a single genetic mutation can sometimes create this whole cascade of changes across the entire genome.
A domino effect.
Exactly, potentially causing far more of the aging process than we might have thought from just fixing that one spot. So this discovery suggests that while base editing is powerful, our ability to make simple genetic tweaks to fully reverse aging might be more complex than initially assumed. It highlights the interconnectedness again.
It always comes back to complexity, doesn't it?
It really does.
Now, artificial intelligence. AI seems to be accelerating everything, and geroscience is no exception. How is AI making an impact here? Helping us understand aging better?
AI is definitely accelerating progress, yes. And it could have a truly major impact, particularly in getting a handle on the main mechanisms of aging.
How so? Like specific examples?
Sure. Machine learning, for instance, has dramatically improved our ability to estimate many biomarkers of aging just by analyzing vast data sets of health information, much faster than humans could.
Finding patterns we missed.
Precisely. It's also radically improved the efficiency and precision of drug discovery, helping identify potential compounds that might target aging pathways much, much faster.
Yeah.
And AI has revolutionized the prediction of protein folding processes. Remember proteostasis?
Yeah, the quality control breakdown.
Well, predicting how proteins fold or misfold is at the very heart of much of aging research, especially for diseases like Alzheimer's. AI is making huge strides there.
So AI is like a powerful new microscope and a drug discovery engine combined.
That's a pretty good way to put it. But it's important to note, Many of these breakthrough areas, senolytics, epigenetic reprogramming, base editing, AI applications, they're really only just emerging from the lab.
Still early days.
Very early days for human application. The exciting advances in geroscience have definitely shown us how incredibly complex aging processes are biologically and how they predispose us to diseases and death. It's huge progress.
Okay.
This has certainly moved us closer to discovering concrete ways of targeting aging processes, everything from lifestyle changes, which are still crucial, to possibly drugs or even genetic manipulations down the line.
But no magic bullet yet.
No, definitely not. The fundamental biology of aging still holds many fundamental mysteries, as the report puts it. There's no single, widely accepted, unifying theory of aging yet.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, this isn't just about incredible science happening in labs. It has enormous implications, right? Not just for healthcare, but for the global economy, sustainable development. What does this all mean for society?
You've hit on the absolutely crucial point. This section really reflects the critical considerations highlighted by the UN report.
Yeah.
It's emphasizing the global reflection that's needed on the profound impact of all this aging research.
So what are the big concerns?
Well, substantially extending human lifespans could mean a larger, older population and potentially a relatively smaller working age population supporting them.
Right, the dependency ratio.
Exactly. This could place enormous burdens on already strained social and health systems and potentially impact economic growth and development.
That's that powerful point again about health span versus just lifespan. If we just extend lives without extending health,
It could be a disaster, frankly.
we could be looking at a huge societal burden, not a triumph. Are there specific countries already grappling with this?
Oh, absolutely. Many developed countries, think Japan, many nations in Europe are already deep into this demographic shift. They're struggling with rising healthcare costs, pension system strains, workforce shortages.
Right.
And the UN report really stresses this. If extended lifespans are not accompanied by preserved function and improved health spans, this could genuinely lead to the collapse of some public health systems globally.
That's stark. But the flip side.
The flip side is huge, too. In this context, the potential economic benefits of successfully targeting aging and truly extending health spans are potentially enormous.
How so?
By keeping people healthier, more productive, more independent for longer, reducing healthcare costs, maybe enabling longer working lives if people choose. This is why the scientific community and policymakers are increasingly advocating for these balanced approaches.
No, focus on health span prevention.
Yes, and building a robust care economy for aging populations, because care will still be needed. It's about quality of life, not just quantity.
And beyond the direct health and economic shifts, how do these demographic changes interact with broader environmental concerns, especially things like climate change?
That's a really significant intersection, and one that's maybe less discussed. The increase in the intensity and frequency of climate events, extreme heat, floods, air pollution, these will disproportionately affect older populations who are often more vulnerable.
Requiring more support, more care.
Exactly. Polluted environments, particularly air pollution, we know can increase cumulative health risks for older persons significantly, worsening respiratory and cardiovascular issues.
And the bigger picture.
But on a larger scale, growth in the global population and an older population profile without major shifts in consumption patterns would likely contribute to greater energy use, potentially adding to global warming.
It's all connected.
It really is. So building a better scientific understanding of these links between environmental risks and aging is going to be a really important global health priority moving forward.
Now, when it comes to the public understanding, all of this complex science and its implications, are we getting the full, clear picture? Or is there a disconnect?
That's a real challenge, honestly. A lot of the research is understandably focused very narrowly on developing these often highly complex potential interventions.
Right, deep in the weeds of biology.
Deep in the weeds. This can lead to major investments pouring into the latest alleged breakthrough, which is good for research, but it doesn't necessarily foster a deeper public understanding of how these advancements could or should benefit humanity as a whole.
And the complexity makes it hard to follow.
Absolutely. Public understanding is largely inhibited by the highly technical nature of the research itself. And let's be frank, also sometimes by the tendency of some researchers or companies to perhaps hype findings to attract funding or attention.
The hype versus hope thing again.
Exactly. So there's a growing number of scientists calling for much greater transparency, Clearer communication of advancements.
In plain language.
Ideally, yes. Communicating the importance of holistic approaches to extend health span, not just lifespan, and improving understanding of all the potential avenues, prevention, delay, management for age-related disorders for everyone.
That everyone point is critical. If we connect this to the bigger picture, who really stands to benefit from these incredible and likely expensive advances, and who might be left behind?
Yeah, this is a huge ethical concern.
It seems like there's a real risk of widening inequalities here.
There is a significant concern, yes. The overwhelming bulk of geroscience research is currently conducted in the global north. Large companies often focus their efforts, understandably from a business perspective, on more affluent population.
Where the market is.
Where the market is initially perceived to be. This could very likely lead to widening global health inequalities if these emerging therapies and treatments are only available or affordable in developed regions, or perhaps tailored only to specific genetic groups predominantly found there.
So what's the counter-argument? What's being advocated for?
Well, there's a strong push for more equitable development of geroscience, reducing barriers to access, thinking about affordability from the start, and crucially, capacity building in the global south.
Helping other countries prepare.
Exactly. Helping middle and low-income countries prepare for their own major demographic transitions and potentially benefit from these advances, too.
And are there other equity issues, like gender?
Yes, definitely. It's also worth mentioning the well-established gender bias that exists in much of health research generally. Women-specific health issues are often overlooked or underfunded.
Right.
So geroscience needs to be really conscious of accounting for gender-specific aging pathways. For example, understanding the complex effects, both positive and negative, of things like hormone replacement therapy during menopause, which significantly impacts women's aging trajectory.
Okay. And finally, let's touch on something that might sound like science fiction, but the UN report mentions it as a consideration. The dual-use potential of geroscience.
Right.
What are the concerns there, and what are people discussing in terms of safeguards?
This is definitely a sensitive and, at the moment, quite speculative concern, but it's one that needs to be part of the conversation as the technology becomes more powerful.
Like military applications?
Potentially. As with any powerful health research, there's a theoretical possibility of military or other non-peaceful applications. For example, therapies designed to combat fatigue or maybe increase cognitive abilities
For soldiers.
could potentially be employed to try and create more robust soldiers. Or in other, perhaps more alarming scenarios, knowledge gained about reversing or slowing aging could theoretically be manipulated to try and create diseases or accelerate aging in adversaries.
That's quite chilling.
It is. And while these remain highly speculative for now, the conversation has begun. There's a growing call for establishing scientific forums, international discussions, and putting normative guardrails in place now for the safe and ethical development of geroscience as these technologies mature. Not waiting until there's a problem.
Proactive ethical thinking.
Exactly.
Wow. We have covered such a vast landscape in this deep dive, from understanding aging right down at the molecular level
The factories and the blueprints.
to exploring these incredible, sometimes controversial scientific breakthroughs in geroscience, and then really examining these crucial societal questions and ethical considerations. It truly reinforces the idea, doesn't it, that aging is no longer seen as just this unavoidable destiny.
Indeed. I think the central insight that emerges is pretty clear. Our genes are the fundamental blueprint, yes. But tools like artificial intelligence are emerging as incredibly powerful ways to interpret and potentially even help us redesign parts of that blueprint.
Genes and AI together.
This new era of precision medicine, combining genomics and AI, really holds formidable power. It could genuinely rewrite the story of what a typical centenarian life looks like.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe we can leave our listeners with this provocative thought, which comes straight from that UN report. The UN Scientific Advisory Board's report underscores that science should enhance the quality of life for all humanity, not just a select few.
A crucial point.
It urges us to move beyond merely extending lifespans and instead prioritize building a society where everyone can age healthily rather than just striving for a non-aging society. So maybe aging isn't destiny, but design guided by genes shaped by choice. The provocative thought is, what choices will we collectively make to shape this future?
It's a profound question. We really encourage you to continue exploring what all this means for your own understanding of health, the future of our society, and the really significant ethical responsibilities that come hand in hand with such powerful scientific advancements.